Ahead to tonight's match, the Saints and the Swans love a close contest.
Meet obstacle_Jim. He's going to put a quick bet on. And he's off. Now hurry. Watch out for the crap. And the esky. And the tiny horse riding man. And the boozed up single mums.
Hi and welcome to Inside. I'm Jenny Brocky. Tonight we're talking about online gambling, who's betting online, what they're betting on and why the industry is now under scrutiny.
Say hello to Freaked_out. He's trying to put a bet on at that place where you put bets on. Maybe just find a seat. Too little. Too beardy. They're freaking everywhere. Get out of there! That's why Freaked_out now bets at sportsbet.com.au for people who like to bet on the net.
Welcome everyone, good to have you all with us. Craig, you love your horses and your footy. Do you go to the TAB?
No, I don't anymore, Jenny. Try and stay away from the tab as much as I can. Hence the reason for Freaked_out at Sportsbet. It's not a place where you can have fun. You've always got a guy you're tapping on the shoulder and showing you a losing ticket when you've just been beaten half a nose on a favourite in Sydney.
So what is a typical week's betting for you? Just explain to us how you bet and what you bet on.
Ranges between 50 to 300. That could be on sport.
$50 to $300 a week you spend.
Yes. It could be between ranging from footy on the AFL, multi bets, or just at on the Saturday on the computer, betting online and betting on my mobile phone. We've got iPhones these days now, and it's easy just to get your iPhone out, turn on.
So do you do all your betting online?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Now I do.
And are you betting more than you used to before you went online?
Yes, I am, yes. It's easier now to have a click and just to press that magical number and see your figures running around
Is
on
that
the track.
a problem for you?
Yeah, it has been. Has been a problem, yeah.
OK, we'll get onto that a bit later. Gareth, you're in a punters club. What does the group bet on?
We basically bet on anything we can get our hands on. I mean, these days you can bet on the X Factor winning. Nothing better than seeing Altie and Childs come home and win X Factor. We can also bet on horses. We can bet on sport.
So how many in your group?
There's 14, and we bank 70 and we bet 70 each week.
Each? 70 each or 70 altogether?
$20 each. Yeah. So and there's a systematic sort of a punt each week. And I think we've got up now enough that we can sort of buy a racehorse in itself. And I'd love to see nothing better than Iris wristwatch coming home and getting black caviar by a nose.
OK, so are you betting more now that you're betting online? Do you only bet online?
No, we bet tab and online. I guess you've got to respect gambling for what it is. You've got to go in with the mindset that you're going to lose money and you're probably not going to win. You're not going to beat the odds because that's what it's there for. But in saying that, there's nothing better than beating guys like this, taking money off them because they're lining their pockets. OK,
the guys like this are running the betting
exactly.
companies, but we'll get to you in a moment too. I want to talk to another punter though, Jake. You play online poker, is that right?
Yep.
How often do you play and how much do you spend?
Daily, and in play at any one time, a little over $10,000 would be about right.
In play, you have about $10,000.
Yep. Playing multiple tables and. Across those tables you'd have about...
So how much time do you spend betting online?
Not a lot. Probably, it depends on how much I feel like playing on any given day. If I don't feel like I simply don't play. If I do, I might spend 2 or 3 hours, very often just an hour or two if I'm not in the mood.
OK, and how much money have you lost and how much have you won?
I'm not really comfortable discussing that, unfortunately, sorry.
Okay, are you happy with the outcome of your betting, or are you not happy with the outcome of your betting?
Very much happy, thank you.
You're happy. Okay, now is this something you did before it was available online?
Yes, it is. I was playing a lot back in Melbourne at Crown Casino when they had the games back there. They still do, but yeah, I moved to online, simply same as the other guys, convenience, and it's more fun, it's faster, it feels, you know, more interactive.
And would you be spending more now than you used to?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
How much more?
Exponentially more, because when you're playing live, you're playing one table with $200 on it, and when you're playing online, you're playing anywhere up to 24 tables with 200, so you're looking at 4,800 or something like that.
Okay, so you can bet across a lot more different things than if you're betting in person.
Absolutely.
Neil Evans, you're with Centrebet. How much how much of your business is online, and how fast is it growing, the online part of your business?
Well, it's growing all the time. Look, online, it's you know, 90-95%. It's virtually the entire operation is online. Now, based around Australasia, of course, but we do have a lot of overseas clients in the UK. The growth is big, and that's become about because I think in the world today that, you know, the idea of taking a fixed odds and having an account or multiple accounts is very attractive to punters. And the markets are there now for everyone. No one anymore can say, well, I'm quite fascinated by betting, but I don't bet because there's nothing there that is in my sort of area that I like or I know something about. Now there's a market there for everyone. So the growth, I think last financial year we went past $1 billion in turnover. Keep in mind that we probably aim around 5 or 6% for revenue of that, so a lot does go back to the punters. But certainly it is a very rock-solid growth industry, particularly in a volatile world. Well, it's not bad.
And how many new clients would you be getting in a week?
Quite a lot. I think, just say, to give you an example, this financial year, which is only 2.5 months old, I think we've got about 13,000 new registrations in 2.5 months, of which about 9,000 to 10,000 around that mark are actively playing.
Okay, I'm wanting to get a bit of a picture of the industry here. Alan, you've been a bookmaker for 14 years, is that right?
That's correct, Jenny.
And you went online relatively recently?
Well, so I got my licence in '97, and I started out as more of a traditional bookmaker, being on course. So whether I'm licensed out of Victoria, so Flemington, Caulfield, Sandown, Moonee Valley, and then in about 2006, really the on-course business was really coming to its end, and so decided to apply for a licence in the Northern Territory and moved into the online/corporate world. Okay,
and how much growth do you see for your business online?
I mean, a lot is the short answer, but the more elaborate answer is to say I think we mirror lots of other industries. So lots of other industries have experienced growth online. I mean, if you rang up iTunes and said, like, you know, how are people buying CDs these days? Well, back when I was younger, I used to walk into a store and buy a CD and take it home and listen to it. I can't remember the last time I bought a CD. I purchased music online. People purchase clothes online, and I think our industry is no different to any of those. And so online has facilitated this growth, and it's made it more efficient in gaming and in lots of other industries.
Ben, what do you bet on?
A range of sports. Overseas sports in particular. The NFL just started this week, and I'm a huge fan of that. Week 1 just kicked off on last Friday. I had probably 17 individual bets across the NFL week, and all up maybe 30 to 40 individual bets across the NRL, AFL, English Premier League, NFL, as I said, and of course the World Cup rugby just kicked off as well. And
how much money do you spend in a week?
Look, it's compared to other major punters and players around Australia, it isn't a lot. For me, it's all about money management, you know, staking my bets accordingly and allocating funds across, as I said, 30 to 40 individual bets a week, across maybe 7 to 10 sports every weekend.
OK, and Keith, you're involved in this with him.
Yeah.
How do you approach it? I mean, it sounds like it's pretty organised.
Yeah, I mean, we go away and do our own independent research, you know, reading our sources, studying the stats, doing whatever, and we then come together and sort of discuss, bring to the table and kind of bounce ideas off each other and go away from there with, I guess, a staking plan for the week according to our confidence in each of the sports and that sort of thing. So we keep it managed and disciplined.
Do you spend on it?
Maybe
a couple of hours a week, but I mean the main thing is because we love it and we're so passionate about it. We're not doing it because we purely see it as a financial opportunity for us, but just because we're so passionate about what we're doing.
Is it a financial opportunity?
Absolutely, but that's secondary because we just love it.
Neil, give us an idea of the range of things that people are betting on, because I want to get more of a picture of this industry.
Well,
a couple of people said they'd bet on anything.
Yep.
I mean, what kinds of things can you bet on?
Well, of course, you've got all the mainstream sports, the bread and butter turnover sports, rugby league and AFL, Australian Open tennis, all the Grand Slam tennis, and you get, golf, rugby union, all the football codes, so all the things that people know about. But really, in the last few years, election betting has been a massive, massive rise. And all the entertainment as well. We're talking singing, dancing and even novelty markets. We've had even royal wedding markets were quite popular.
Mobile phone throwing?
Mobile phone. They're a little bit more overseas.
Carrying?
Yes.
Wife carrying?
They're quite popular with our Scandinavian clients. They treat wife throwing, mobile phone throwing and sauna sitting a bit like the state of origin over there. So you won't find too many Australian punters
betting on that.
And who
decides what can be bet on?
Well, myself with my colleagues at work, we look at the markets, we talk about opportunities, and some of these markets are purely novelty markets. We don't take a lot of money. The media like them, of course. They're good talking points. And, they're also a source for new clients. You quite often get people who just play those little entertainment markets, the singing, dancing markets. They might spread their wings a little bit later into other markets. So they're purely... Really, you don't hold a lot of money. They're really, a good PR tool for the company.
But within those sporting codes that you talk about, there are all kinds of bets you can place, aren't there? You can bet on who scores first, or who kicks the first goal, or what happens during the game. Yeah, all through that. I mean, the big football games, of course, you can have hundreds and hundreds of team, individual matchups within the game. As you said, first points, first try, first goal, first behind. And tennis is another big one where there's all sorts of little breakout markets inside the game itself. And they're very, very popular. They're aside from the big punters who bet head-to-head, but these bring the smaller punters in who like watching the game, who like having a bet, but it might just be $5 or $10 on how many aces in one set. OK, and these are newer options because online gambling has opened up those extra options for people to bet during games and so on in a way they couldn't before. That's right, yeah, it's opened it up, but it's also, you've got to try and keep, source new clients and keep it going. There's only so many big punters in the land on the major events, so that's where you're trying to attract the fun punter who wants to bet in the game but just is happy to have small bets on all those novelty little breakout things that maybe they never thought they'd be able to have a bet on. They're very popular and they're through most of the major sports. All right, David Schwartz in Melbourne. You're a former AFL player. You lost $4 million gambling before you quit in 2005. Fun gamblers? We're hearing from people who say it's fun. They think it's a great thing that they can bet on all these things. Were you ever an online gambler?
No, I wasn't. The industry's changed so much. I think back in 2005, it was just starting off, and I think that indicates how quick and how rapid the movement is in relation to online gambling. I deal with a lot of punters now that are trying to give up, and they're all talking about the transformation over the last couple of years from being in the TAB situation or being at the racetrack now to spending a fair bit of time at home and betting online. So it's certainly a changing environment. So what do you think about all these options being available? I think a lot of the codes and a lot of the sports are allowing this to happen because they've got to check off every bet, as Neil was saying, that they can bet on the first goal kicker. Well, in relation to the AFL or the NRL, they have to tick off on those bets, so it's in collaboration. Maybe the sports have to be tighter with some of the bet types for the integrity of the game, but look, I don't have a problem with the bets that people are betting on. I don't have an issue with that. I just think with online, because it's not regulated, it's really hard to tell who's betting what, where it's going, who's doing it, how often it's being done. It's pretty hard to get a grip on how big it actually is. But it'd be fair to say, just through the people I'm talking to, it's a pretty big monster. A big monster. How do you think you would have coped if you'd been in the situation you're in, where you did have a problem now with all those options available? I don't think I would have left home. I think for someone in my position that did have a profile, going down the tab was a bit of a hassle. Not having to go into the tab or go into the races, it's hassle-free. So for people, in playing professional sport, it might be a bonus for them not to be actually seen. I think with the smartphone technology, you're not being photographed. So for those punters, it's hassle-free and it's anonymity. Nick Xenophon in Canberra, you've pushed for the current inquiry into online gambling. You want tighter regulation of the online gambling sector. Isn't it just a more contemporary version of what's always been around? But we know from the Productivity Commission's previous reports that the more accessible a form of gambling is,
the greater the degree of likely problems. That poker machines were a big problem 10 years ago. They still are because of their easy access. There's nothing more easy in terms of access than online gambling. And I think, as Tim Costello said 10 years ago, with online gambling, you can lose your home without ever actually having to leave it. It's that ease of access, it's that ability to have a punt at any time that really makes it very problematic. If you're intoxicated, if you're suffering, if you have some sort of mental health issue, and if you're in your home, that's not readily apparent as distinct from being in a venue. So it is very problematic, and I think the next big wave of problem gambling will come from online gambling unless we're very careful about the regulatory framework.
OK, we'll come back to that a little bit later on. And coming up also, how sports betting during games is impressing some little fans.
The higher money is for when the team's going to win, and the lower money is when the team's going to lose, most likely.
Tonight we're talking about online gambling, and Russell, you and your family love your AFL, but you've got a few worries about your gorgeous 7-year-old son who is very good at maths. Let's have a look at why you're worried.
My name's Ben, I'm 7, turning 8, and I go for St Kilda. I'm good with numbers. Maths is my best thing in school. And when we have recess and lunch, I always play football. I started to draw them this year at the Western Bulldogs and Saints game. The higher money is for when the team's gonna win, and the lower money is when the team's gonna lose, most likely. My two best buddies, they go for the Western Bulldogs. They get a lot of money this year because they lost a lot of games this year. Yeah, the worst teams have most money, and when it was Saints versus Sydney, I think the money was almost a draw. It was $1.56 St Kilda, and Sydney Swans, I think, $1.60 maybe. I look on the telly when at home if I'm not at the game, or when I'm at the game I just look on the giant screen. It tells you the money. I see the sports bets on the ads, and I really like the sport bet ads. When he goes to put a bet on where the place where you put the bets on.
Put bets on.
Everyone in there was freaky and creepy, and like monsters. Because when he lined up, this guy just turned his head around like this. Then he saw two seats, one with a little green guy and one with a woman with a beard.
They're freaking everywhere. Get out of there!
I draw them because I really like my footy, and I like drawing them because it helps me learn my numbers for each quarter, and it also helps me learn my numbers in school. I think the Saints will get into the grand final and win it, maybe.
Maybe not. My team beat the Saints on the weekend. Russell, when did Ben start connecting the footy and the odds?
We first noticed it this season, so I actually first noticed it when coming to my parents' place. They were looking after my kids for school holidays a few months ago, and my son loves to draw, as you saw, loves to draw pictures, particularly football pictures, all the teams, and it was my dad that brought it to my attention where he'd been there drawing during the day. He showed my dad some pictures that he had done, and then when obviously that raised some concern, and then when I came to pick them up, my dad said, "Look, have a look at these pictures." And
does he always do that?
He draws pictures all the time. So
with the odds in them?
He started doing it probably around last school holidays, so maybe 2 months ago was when I first saw. He's been doing the pictures all year with the scores and the teams and the colours. It's just started coming into his pictures.
I wonder what some of our punters here think about a 7-year-old seeing the footy that way. Gareth, what do you think?
Definitely, it's not the right thing, you know, and it's annoying when you're watching the footy that someone like Ray Warren, a rugby league commentator, has to put in the plug for Betfair or whoever it is. You know, surely Ray Warren wants to commentate on rugby league, not plug the betting.
So you don't like that, even though you're a punter yourself?
Yeah, no, I'm totally against it.
What are some of the other Punters, do you think?
Disgusting. I think a little kid gambling or looking at gambling at that age, I think the people here that run these organisations should hang their heads in shame. That's what our society is becoming. They're responsible. It lays at their feet, and they should hold their heads in shame that that's what they're creating, a generation of young people who are going to gamble, and that's their only attitude is that this is how we're going to make money.
OK, Neil, response?
Well, I would say that it's happening. That is happening because the laws of this land were relaxed by the government. So what, we exploit them, do we? No. Because the government's relaxed. When I first came to this job, there was none of that available. All the criticism of bookmakers, we make a lot of money out of the sports we bet on, and nothing comes back into the game. Nothing comes back into the community. Now they relax all the laws. Yes, you can do deals with clubs, and of course part of those deals, prices go up, signage goes around the ground, and so on and so on and so on.
How do you sleep at night knowing that you're destroying families and you're destroying the lives? Marriages are breaking down because people are having their housekeeping money ripped out of them because people want to gamble it on a quick fix to get rich. You are creating a problem in our society. You're largely responsible for it.
And it is being pared back, as we know. It's already been announced by the Minister, the 12-month moratorium to bring it all back.
But why has it taken the government to do... I mean, the industry likes to say it self-regulates. You know, why...
It's a highly competitive commercial industry. I mean, Alan will back this up here. I mean, it's a commercial industry.
So you take advantage of people in a commercial industry?
OK, I think you've made your point. I want to move on to a few other people. Jake, you wanted to say something?
Just simply, like, you're pointing this single thing out, but I mean, alcohol and cigarettes do exactly the same thing. I mean, cigarettes were banned from advertising. Alcohol, you know, they're advertising everywhere, and that tears families apart, kills people. People drink and drive. So many deaths a year. I mean, gambling doesn't cause deaths. Alcohol directly causes hundreds of thousands of deaths every single year.
OK, what about other people? What do you think, Ben?
Look, in regards to live betting during games, I haven't got a problem with it. I mean, it doesn't affect me to go and have an impulse bet. If anything, I think it adds to the spectacle of the match that I'm watching. You know, if you see at half-time that an outsider's at $8, for example, you want to sit around, or I want to sit around and watch the second half to see if that outsider can actually come back into the match and make a contest of it.
But Ben, do you think that's OK for you? But do you think it's OK to do because my 7-year-old son is seeing those exact same odds and they're filtering down into his mind? It's normalising gambling for a 7-year-old. Now, it's great for you as a punter. You can walk into the TAB at the football and check out those odds. So it's not that I have a problem with them being in an accessible location to adults who understand it, but how you can say that it's acceptable and it's a good thing to have them up on the screens for everyone to see.
Yeah, Alan,
I mean, is it potentially... I mean, I don't have children. I look forward to the day I have children. And if my son or daughter came to me and started speaking to me at the age of 7 in relation to odds about a game, I would actually welcome that because I would want to start the dialogue with them at a young age in order to educate them about the perils of gambling. The same way if it was alcohol. If they see a Carlton Draft beer commercial on TV, I would want to discuss that with them because by making the topic taboo, they actually... It increases their curiosity and would increase their need in order to explore. Whereas if I can sit down with my 7-year-old son or daughter and explain to them, you know what, these are what the odds mean, this is the dangers in betting, we need to be careful, this is how we need to tackle it, the same way as whether we're talking about drugs, cigarette smoking, alcohol or anything else, I would welcome it as an opportunity to educate my child and bring this dialogue to the dinner table.
OK, David, you're Ben's granddad. What do you think about that?
There's a few cop-outs on both sides, especially Neil's, that hiding behind the fact that the laws allow it. I mean, where's the morality a little bit? Who's looking after the children? All I had to worry about as a 14-year-old in the 60s was where babies came from, and my parents, that's all they had to worry about. But at 8 years of age, 7 years of age, Ben has now been introduced to this. And I do disagree with you. You said you would love your child to come to you and ask you about this. If you're a parent that's switched on, and I'd hate to be a young parent these days, you just don't get time to watch everything. Your kids aren't going to come to you and say, hey, Dad, look at this. How do you explain this? We were just lucky that we fluked it. We fluked it, and that's what brought it to our attention.
I actually agree with what that man said. It has to be pared back in prime time. And this argument about it's being rammed down people's throats in the most sensitive times, kids, I do concede that. But I tell you what, I'm more concerned as a parent of 2 girls what they read on social websites and the interaction chat and what's allowed there. and what goes on there, because it is disgusting. But for some reason, it's always betting industries that cop it in the neck.
Okay, Craig?
I think the government needs to take a step. Victorian legislation has had it that they've relaxed the laws. I mean, if they relax the laws on the speed limit, are we going to do 120, 130 k's if they make it? That's the law. They've relaxed the laws for these guys to make money, but the government needs to look at themselves and look at what they've done, because they're the ones that have hurt everything. They're the ones that have relaxed the laws, and they're the ones that need to step up to the plate.
I don't think government really should have anything to say with it, because they're getting a bit of money out of everything they do anyway. I think the government has compromised its situation, especially with poker machines. They're collecting revenue off people, you know, indirectly, and then when someone goes out and steals from their employer, they then sentence them to jail without any question whatsoever that they've actually been a party to the actual theft. I think government is compromised.
Okay, can I just, we're going to get on to the government regulation a little bit later on, but I just wanted to ask you, Russell, you refused to buy Ben a St Kilda jersey this season. Why?
Because the new major sponsor is Centrebet, and he wants one. He wants a new jumper. He wants a new one every year. But until that changes, I can't have my 7-year-old boy.
It's not the only team.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Would you do the same thing if the sponsor was Carlton or Tui's or something like that?
Potentially.
Yeah.
Potentially. We haven't had that problem to date. Not in my children's.
Let's have a look at a Centrebet ad featuring St Kilda. Okay, so how do people feel about those connections? That's not the only... We don't want to pick on St Kilda, by the way. It's not the only team with those sort of connections. But how do people feel about that?
I can tell you my son loves that ad because it's got the Saints in it, and he loves the Saints. It's one of his favourites.
That's the thing. See, what concerns me, the things I've heard here, it's the antisocial aspect that's creeping in a little bit. The first commercial shows us a scary place to go. So you stay home. These guys are saying that they're at home on their iPhones and iPods, and they don't go to the racetrack anymore. They stay at home. It's fast, it's easier, and it's promoting an antisocial outlook.
All right.
There's other aspects. We do it for fun, you know. Like we want to save up enough money, as I said, to get a racehorse. And you know, if these guys, they talk about futures, if they want to take on Irish wristwatch against Black Caviar in 10 years, you know, would they do that? I don't know. It just seems that there's so much that you can gamble on these days. It's a bit extreme, but it's the Aussie way, you know. It's social and it's fun.
Malcolm, can I ask you, because you represent all the major sporting bodies, whether you're comfortable with betting companies sponsoring teams in the NRL and the AFL, things like that?
I think, as we've heard, Jenny, a lot has happened recently in this space. So it's only the last 3 or 4 years that there's been an abundance of advertising on sporting teams, sporting events. I think, as with alcohol sponsorship, fast food sponsorship, tobacco sponsorship, we need to find the right balance. And the government, there are a number of inquiries on at the moment. Senator Xenophon's involved in one of those inquiries. And the major professional sports are well and truly in the middle of those inquiries. We want to find the right balance so that appropriate advertising codes of conduct can be put in place.
Not the right balance now?
I think it's got out of balance with the particular one that concerns me, and I think it concerns some of the major sports, is the advertising for betting odds in commentary, where the commentator, as we heard in the NRL, is announcing the odds there. I don't think that has a long-term place in these games, but ultimately that's up to the sports to decide that. But we're seeking the right balance. We're working with government. We're working with government across a number of fronts in relation to online gambling, minimising harm from gambling. I don't think anyone likes to see 7-year-old boys depicted like this, where the odds there are a major focus of their involvement in sport. We'd all rather see them focusing on what's happening on the ground, what's happening with their team.
So does that mean getting rid of that in games?
I think that's an option. The government is certainly looking at that. Senator Conroy is leading an inquiry into that, and the sports are working with him to look at advertising, in-play advertising, in-commentary advertising. So the sports, the television broadcasters, the gambling industry, I think we're all in that together, and hopefully we'll find the right balance.
There's too much accessibility for people over the age of 18 and people that aren't children, that they can go on their iPhone, go on the internet, do all this sort of gambling via other means, that they don't need to see the bets, they don't need to see all this in your face, the odds told by the commentator or on your screen or whatnot. If they want to gamble, if they want to do these quick bets, these fast-paced things, they've got the accessibility to do it on the internet, do it on their phone, do it at the TAB, at the pub. It doesn't have to be thrown in your face like it is all over the TV and in the commentary.
We've been talking a lot about sport. I want to move on to poker, Sean, because you're the editor-in-chief of pokermedia.com, which is an information site for Australian poker players. How big is online poker?
It's very big, Jenny. It's a massive international industry in Australia. Look, it's very difficult to get data because it's not a regulated industry in this country. We're probably looking at around about 350 to 400,000 online poker accounts that are held by people in Australia.
And promoted by people like Shane Warne.
Exactly. Shane Warne with the 888 organisation is an international ambassador and obviously creates that very clear connection.
Now, that's a website that Australian players can access.
Correct.
Can you explain how online poker works in Australia and what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do?
Sure. Look, it's very different to what we've been talking about here tonight because under the Interactive Gaming Act, it is legal for people like Jake to play online poker, but it's actually illegal for those sites to offer the services to players in Australia. So we're talking a very different beast.
So you can play, but
Yes.
you can't set up a site here. So if you play, you've got to play
You can set up a site in Australia, but you cannot offer those services to Australian players. But the offshore sites offer their services to Australian players, and they do so illegally.
Okay, and can you quantify how big?
In a global sense, look, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. In terms of yield for the sites that are operating here for Australian players, you're probably looking at figures of around about $300 million leaving the country every year.
I want to talk to someone who's been in trouble with online casinos, which can't legally operate here in Australia, and the trouble's been this year. Charlie, tell us what you were betting on and what happened.
Yes, sure. Look, I was roped into, similar to what the last speaker was speaking about, it looked like an Australian gambling site, Australian flags, Australian currency, and look, I played mainly blackjack, and the offer there was you put down $300 Australian on your credit card, and you would actually get $300 back in return, so you'd actually get $600 to bet with. Which seemed like a pretty attractive offer. Now, there was a star there. Now, normally most people, like mobile phone contracts or whatever, they don't really read the terms and conditions. You just go straight into gambling. So I had $600 in my account. I only put in $300 on my credit card. Within, I'd say, 2 to 3 hours, I was about $5,000 up.
Had you ever gambled before, Charlie?
Not online, no. Not online. Very little at normal type of casinos. I mean, I'm talking less than maybe $50, just very, yeah, basically no.
So let's fast forward. What happened when you tried to take your money out and how much did you have?
Okay, so it was close to $6,000 up, and this is in the space of about 4 to 5 hours. Obviously, I was quite excited because I only put down $300. I tried to withdraw it, and a little chat message came up, and they said, look, congratulations, firstly, and welcome to our online casino. We see that you're trying to withdraw, your nearly $6,000 Australian winnings. There were some terms and conditions attached to that extra $300 we gave you to match your $300, so that was $600, and that was to wager 1,000 times the amount you had put down. So you'd have to actually turn over, win or lose, $300,000. So I couldn't actually withdraw it. And at that time, I was, I was actually quite angry. I was like, this is not right. I should have read I guess it's my fault. Or, I should have read the terms and conditions. Or
so Charlie, we're going to have to fast forward a little bit on your story.
Sure.
Where are you up to now?
Well, in the end, I tried to withdraw that. They said no. Terms and conditions, etc. We'll give you $300 back, or you can just wager that $6,000 that you've got and go for your life. So that's what I did. I ended up losing it all, but I felt a sense of confidence that I actually turned $300 or $600 because they gave me $300 and 10 times that. So I was like $6,000 up in the space of 3 to 4 hours. So I guess it gave me the confidence that you put down $600 for example, and within the space of a couple of hours you're 10
So how
times
much
up.
did you lose altogether, Charlie?
How much did I lose altogether?
Yep.
About 125,000 Australian dollars.
Okay, Nick Xenophon, you've taken up Charlie's case. It's an offshore site. What can you do?
Well, this is an offshore site based in Gibraltar, as there are many other online casinos in Gibraltar. It has taken a long time to get an initial response from Gibraltar in relation to this. Clearly, there are real issues there, and I think, but there's a fundamental underlying issue in terms of how difficult it is with online gambling, that if you offer online poker, online casino games, the potential for harm is significantly great. And Charlie lost an enormous amount of money in a very short period of time, and the regulatory framework in some of these countries is quite woeful.
Now, Neil and Alan, you would like to see it possible to play online poker here in Australia, is that right?
I mean, Jenny, this is the perfect example of why we should legalise it, because our recourse is second to none. I mean, Mr Xenophon there obviously tried to approach them, because obviously their approach to it was untoward and not how we'd want to conduct ourselves. If this was an organisation legalised in Australia, there would be recourse and there would be a regulation that they would have to abide by so that people could withdraw their money in an appropriate fashion. And we need to bring this in line. There's 400,000 or 500,000 people, as this gentleman just said, betting on poker in Australia, Australian citizens doing this with offshore providers who are potentially subpar.
Okay,
Yeah.
Next, yeah.
I was just going to say, and it's a similar argument, and this is something I'd like to put to the Senator, as you can see, that you can't, following on from what Alan said, you can't police what you can't see. And it's the same with exotic betting, and do we run the risk if you clamp down on that? Does it manifest itself in a very ugly fashion somewhere else?
Okay, Nick Xenophon, the Productivity Commission has recommended a trial of regulated online poker here in Australia because it would be easier to control. What do you think about that?
Well, the downside of that is that the more accessible you make a form of gambling, if you open it up, you'll have more people who participate in it. When you get the sanction of the state, the imprimatur of the state, if you like, by having it regulated here in Australia. And the downside of that is that you'll have more people playing and inevitably more problem gamblers. Whereas if you take an approach to say enough is enough, we're already the world's #1 gamblers in the world in terms of per capita gambling losses, $18 billion a year, the world's highest in terms of number of problem gamblers. How many more opportunities to gamble do we need in addition to the ones we have now? We can't cope with the problems we have now. Why open up this industry anymore with the problems you'll inevitably get?
But in an online environment, won't people just go offshore anyway?
Well, they won't go offshore if they know of the risks involved in that. If they won't go offshore. They do go offshore now, but they will stay. There'll be a much bigger gambling industry here in Australia if you give it the seal of approval. At the moment, people know that these sites, many of these sites are dodgy, that there are real risks involved. As Charlie saw, that he really got bitten quite hard by this. So, open up this industry, give it a seal of approval, you will see a big expansion. Let's look at poker machines. Before poker machines were legalised in other states, they've been in New South Wales for many years, there wasn't a poker's industry in those other states. You now have a situation where, with problem gambling from poker machines alone, 100,000 people almost with a severe gambling problem, another 250,000 plus who are at risk or already showing the signs of developing a severe problem. Why open it up and why have more problems?
Okay, coming up, we'll talk more about the future of online gambling. That's next on Insight. Tonight we're talking about online gambling, and Michael Brodie, you head the regulatory authority in the Northern Territory where most of Australia's online bookmakers are based.
That's right, yeah.
Why are they there?
Well, I think they're there probably for two reasons, and I guess there are other people in the room who've got commercial reasons for why they're there. But in the 1990s, what the NT government did was make a decision that there was an opportunity for innovation and growth. From an economic perspective in the NT, there was a great degree of stagnation in the bookmakers market. And what the NT government did was say, we don't understand why we have to regulate only to individuals. Why can't we regulate companies? And that's done globally quite successfully. And the other thing that the NT government said at the time was, why is it that you have to be standing on a rail to take a bet? Why can't we regulate for integrity and control questions over the internet or over the phone? And of course, in the 1990s, the phone was a lot more important than the internet is now. But those were the principal questions, and we've.
But don't you allow more markets too? Allow more betting markets?
I guess what the government at the time did was say that there's space for a bookmaker's product that is not just the TAB, that people are demanding other things and demanding a more innovative product. And as a jurisdiction, the NT government of the day was ready to make that available to the public and ready to regulate that structure.
Okay, Nick Xenophon, innovation, is that the way you see it?
No, I see it as an expansion of a market, and with it more problem gamblers. It's as simple as that. How much more saturated do we want to be in Australia when it comes to problem gambling? How many more people do we want to see by the wayside? And I think one of your contributors said, look, it's different from alcohol, nobody dies. Well, look, I've sat down with family members who've lost loved ones through a gambling-related suicide, and that is a reality, and that's something that the industry can't ignore.
Okay, Neil, your reaction?
Does Nick, do you want to see the National Rugby League continue, Nick?
Look, of course I want to see National Rugby League continue. I think that's a silly question. The question is, do you have to have gambling odds in kids' faces all the time?
No, you don't. I agree with that. You don't.
Approach?
No, I do agree with that.
You agree. Well, let's work on what we can agree with.
And we are going in that direction, aren't we?
Let's review that. Well, we're going that direction, but we haven't yet seen the legislation. It's still being dealt with the states. Ultimately, this is federal law. It should be dealt with at a federal approach, a national approach. My concern is, let's manage what we have now. Let's not open up the market to online poker, online casino games, where the risk for problems is exponential. But let kids be kids. Let them just be sports fans. Where kids seem to know more about the odds than the game, there's something seriously wrong.
Okay, David, we heard then the mention of the connections between, from Neil, about the future of, the rugby league and its connection with gambling. I mean, what's your response to that? Can the AFL afford to move away from gambling?
Well, it's my understanding that the AFL received about $2 million last year from up to 20 bookmakers, and whilst they are taking those sorts of bets, they're in collaboration, so they're actually dealing with the bookmakers to make sure that the integrity is upheld. But at the same time, when you are taking off the bookmakers, you've got to expect backlash like you're saying. I work in the media, I understand and I know what the public are thinking at the moment, and it's too skew-whiffed. It's too out of kilter with what society's thinking, and the amount of betting advertising is out of control. What do you want
to see, David? What would you like to see happen?
Well, there should be no live updates at venues. There should be no live updates during the game itself. I'm a broadcaster as well, and there's nothing more infuriating than having to give updates of odds throughout the match. I find it embarrassing. I'm a recovering addict myself. Part of my role is that I don't do it. I've made that very clear, but my colleagues have to. Because often it pays the bills. And whilst the money's coming in from the betting agencies to government, to the codes, to the associations, they're almost drunk on it. It's that appealing.
Okay, Neil,
yeah,
response?
Look, it's a fair argument, and the balance is critical, and I understand that. I've got kids myself, but 3 hours before we did this show, I got a call from someone in the AFL, from a club, wanted to throw $1 million sponsorships, not even my quite area, but all these sponsorship ideas for the seasons coming up and all these wonderful things we can do. So I understand how sensitive it is, I do, despite what people might think. And as I say, steps have been taken to pare it back as far as prime time and the live stuff, and I can understand that. I've always said very tiny percentage. I don't agree that people bounce out of their seat if they've never had a bet in their life and suddenly run to the computer and put a bet on just because someone threw up some odds. It doesn't happen because live punters they're well experienced. They know what they're doing. But I'm not saying that it shouldn't happen. That's just reality.
OK, but what would you be prepared to accept in terms of limits on this?
Well, where's the line as far as advertising, promotions, or I do a lot of stuff in the media, which is just contact stuff as well as the signed deals and the contracts. Malcolm, what do you think? It comes back to, I always said the AFL led the way in this, but I feel that a lot of the sporting organisations have sat on their hands a bit and suddenly they've woken up and thought, gee, we need this money coming back into the game because the pressure's building. The money's coming back in.
OK, Malcolm, he's throwing it onto you.
What do you think?
So what do you think?
The money in the overall scheme of things that the professional sports receive as a product fee for use of their intellectual property is minimal. David talked about $2 million for the AFL. That would be less than 1% of the AFL's revenue. So I don't think it's an issue about the money. I agree that the proliferation of advertising needs to be better regulated, and I think the best way to do that is if the sports, the broadcasters and the betting industry come together and have a code of conduct the way they have in other areas. I think we can achieve the right balance there. That's what it's about.
And I think you'll find the bookmaking industry will meet them halfway there.
We're talking a lot about sport, and I agree with Malcolm. I think the contribution from bookmakers to the sports isn't material. But if we look at the horse racing industry, I mean, it's a whole industry basically propped up by wagering dollar. The horse racing industry employs nearly 250,000 people in Australia. It contributes maybe $5 billion to our national economy. And in Senator Xenophon's state, it employs 50,000 people in South Australia. So it's an integral part of the horse racing industry, which is an integral part of our economy and our employment. And I agree we need to find a happy medium. But the debate needs to be, it's not about betting. I think we all agree that having a flutter is part of the fabric of our society. I think it's about harm minimisation, and it's about providing a safety net and support for people who have a gambling issue, the same way for people who have an alcohol issue or a drug issue. Provide support, don't over-regulate.
All right, Nick Xenophon, just quickly, what are you going to be pushing for in this inquiry?
Well, this inquiry is already underway. We need to have a review of the Interactive Gambling Act. It's 10 years old. I think everyone agrees that a lot has changed in 10 years. The issue is, do you liberalise other forms of gambling, to have online casino-type games here in Australia to give it the seal of approval? I think that would be a big mistake. And let's deal with the issue of odds. Let's not have it in your face. And also, let's have some real protections for the existing forms of gambling so this doesn't get completely out of control.
Now, before you go, Nick Xenophon, you're going to be leaving us to go back into Parliament, and you've said today that you're going to use parliamentary privilege to name a Catholic priest who's allegedly involved in sexual abuse. Why do you think it's appropriate for you to take that upon yourself to do in Parliament?
Look, I spoke in the Senate about this last night. These are serious matters. They've been raised by Archbishop John Hepworth, who's the primate of the traditional Anglican Communion. These relate to matters that occurred many years ago. He approached the Catholic Church in South Australia 4 years ago about these allegations. They still haven't been dealt with satisfactorily. I think there's an obligation, a duty of care, not only to John Hepworth, but to the parishioners for the last surviving priest, who is currently still at a parish in Adelaide, and I've given the Catholic Church an opportunity to respond to this. I'm hoping that when I get out of the studio that they will do what they've done in many other cases, as Catholic churches have done, and have an appropriate investigation. And in the meantime, the person would be stood down on administrative leave. That is what occurs if there are serious allegations. And I think that it's fair to say that the Catholic Church in South Australia has dealt with this very differently, quite poorly, in contrast to the Catholic Church in Melbourne, where they did have a process that John Hepworth was quite pleased with.
And if you get out of the studio now and that the Catholic Church doesn't agree to what you want, you're going to go ahead and name this Catholic priest?
Look, I feel that I have no choice. I think there's a duty of care issue here.
What about the law? What about the law and the police? Why do you think it's appropriate for you to do it as a politician? What about the legal process?
Because the issue here is that Archbishop Hepworth has wanted this dealt with internally by the Church. He has elected not to go to the police, as he is entitled to. There is an issue here about there being a 4-year gap between these matters being brought to the Church's attention and this person still running a parish in Adelaide. And I think wouldn't you want to know if a person is running a parish and they've been accused of serious matters such as this? The fact that there hasn't been an investigation, that there's been I believe, a distinct lack of process, is very worrying. And this is something that I will do reluctantly, and I'm hoping that the Church takes a different approach on this in the next hour.
Okay. Does Archbishop Hepworth support what you're doing, planning to do?
I had a discussion with Archbishop Hepworth earlier today, and he understands the course I've taken. I think his preference is, he's made it clear to the media that he would rather that this matter be investigated, that the priest in question be stood down, so that there can be a thorough and appropriate investigation.